Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which really isn't live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally, we have a special guest or two when we can get him to show up. Sit down, strap in, hold on tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Main car is 10. Green flag, green flag, green flag. Go, 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 go.
Welcome, everybody. It's another week here. I'm Greg Engel, and with me, as always, from merry old England, Owen Johnson. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, Greg. How are you?
Good, good. Look, before we dive into this, have you seen Princess Kate walking around London?
I have not. I feel like if I have, I could sell those photos.
Yeah, you could. That's what I was going to say.
We
can make a mint, man, because, I obviously would expect a cut. But, they were talking about she photoshopped some photos and some whole crap was going on. And then I guess there was another photo that appeared later with the Queen that allegedly Princess Kate photoshopped. I got nothing to know about that, no knowledge of that. But allegedly, Kate did Photoshop all the grandchildren in with the Queen, and the poor Queen never really sat with all those grandchildren. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Maybe Kate's a fan. I don't know, but maybe Kate is a fan of NASCAR. Maybe not. But I just kind of find it really weird, this obsession we have with the royal family in England. I mean, who cares? Well, obviously we do. I mean, I get it in some ways. Queen Elizabeth II was a great monarch. She did a lot of great stuff in the world. And then I'm a huge fan of Prince Harry, only because I'm a veteran. He's a veteran. He has the Invictus Games, which if you've never checked that out, it's for wounded warriors specifically. And it's like an Olympics for wounded warriors. I'm a big fan of that, big supporter of that. I'm also a huge fan of Meghan Markle. She's a beautiful woman, great talented actress, and I'm happy for them. They live out in Santa Barbara, California, which I've been to, and I love Santa Barbara. So I'm kind of jealous that they're able to do that. But this royal obsession we got, I don't understand it, and why it's breaking news that Kate is out seen walking with her husband. So, but anyway, if you do see her, snap a couple shots, man, and hook a brother up, and we'll make some money off of that. So there you go.
I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, you keep an eye out. All right, let's talk about Bristol, because it wasn't just a normal Bristol race. It was one of the best races I have seen in many, many, many years in recent memory. And Denny said on his podcast earlier, Denny Hamlin, who won the race, that Denny Hamlin won. Let's not get past that. They cleaned off the dirt. We were back to the concrete at Bristol. And he said that in practice, they noticed that with 30-lap runs, even in practice, they were starting to see some issues, but they really didn't think too much about it, because everyone thought once the rubber got down and the track warmed up, it would get better. Well, it turned out it didn't, and that made for an amazing race. Crews and drivers were challenged, and that's something that gave all of us a show. Here's what Chris Gabehart, the winning crew chief, had to say.
It was fantastic. The whole weekend was nothing what any of us expected. The driver, the crew chiefs, the engineers, the pit crew, the team, the spotter. I mean, from the minute practice was over, we suspected something was going to be different. And I think a lot of us thought maybe 80 or 100 in, this place would kind of rubber in and get a little more familiar. But it did not, and it was a blast. And I'm not just saying that because we won. I'm saying that because it was fun to have to do something so unrefined. Everything about our business gets to be 16th of a round and 10th of an air pressure. And boy, Denny, if you just maneuver this 3 inches, you'll be perfect. There was not going to be perfect this weekend ever. And I thought that made for a fantastic show.
And at the end of the day, most of the drivers seemed to like it, including winner Denny Hamlin.
Listen, it's certainly most of the answers you're going to get from me today. It's going to be from a bias standpoint, right? We won the race. There's probably a handful that hated what happened, but I think if you change nothing, right? If you change absolutely nothing with the tire, nothing with the resin, and we came back next week, many teams would make big adjustments with their cars to help with tire wear, and drivers would make adjustments. So it would automatically get better no matter what. Do we want them wearing out in 40, 50 laps? No. That's probably a little bit on the low end for sure. But certainly this is what happens when you get tire wear. It is comers and goers, and I guarantee you, surely you guys at NASCAR have sent out a stat pack of all the passes that happened today. So yeah, it has to be. But I mean, there was just, there was times where I was leading and ties just pressure me, and I'm like, no, it's not time. It's go ahead. And that's how it used to be. It really used to be that way. So it was fun from my standpoint, because obviously I had a good car that helped me, do what I needed to do.
Of course, Goodyear came out during the race, and they sent Greg Stucker out there, who's the director of their racing operations. And he was saying, we don't know what's going on. We don't understand it. And really distressed, because let's face it, Goodyear missed the mark on this one. But boys and girls, to me, this was a happy accident. It was a beautiful disaster. And Chris Gabehart was asked about this and about the fact that, are they going to bring these tires back in September? Do you think they'll be able to fix this issue? And what could happen in the future?
Well, I mean, again, everyone in this garage area, whether it's the teams or NASCAR or Goodyear, are so good at what they do that it's rare that you have surprises anymore. Everything's typically so well thought out and calculated, and this weekend, for whatever reason, we just missed. Now, we've seen this before. We've seen cold Martinsville races not rubber up. We've seen Dover last year in practice, concrete track didn't rubber up. And yesterday, all of a sudden, didn't rubber up. There was a small change with the traction compound that got laid on the bottom, and whether that contributed or not, who knows? But my guess is we will bring something different back. But I really think we have to learn from this. I mean, you've been hearing the drivers and the teams ask for challenges effectively, and it was a challenge today. So. Me personally, I hats off to Goodyear. I mean, I don't want them to get any heat for this. I think Goodyear makes million-mile tires on the road. I don't think they should make million-mile tires on the racetrack. I want them to have to make these drivers make decisions, make these crew chiefs make decisions, and if they blow out, that's on the crew chief, and that's on the team. I think that should be, part of our sport to a certain degree. And force the world's best to make decisions.
All right. So we had a great race. We had guys and drivers and teams adjusting to it. The TV ratings were up significantly. Of course, this race last year in this position was Atlanta, but they had great TV ratings. Let me ask you, Owen, first off, did you see it in the pub? I know what the answer is, I think.
I had a swim meet, so I had to watch it a little bit delayed, unfortunately, but I came into it knowing how good you thought it was, and I was definitely not disappointed at all. Great race, a lot of strategy plays and movers and shakers, which we haven't seen on short tracks really since the next gen got introduced, and so I really enjoyed it.
I think it was a great race, and it harkened back to the races of old when as Chris Gabehart talked about, they go by degrees, and the engineers get in there and 3 inches this way or that way, and all that was out the window. And they just had to go old school. And I really, really hope that NASCAR doesn't react too much, and Goodyear doesn't react too much to this. And, Bob Pockris, Fox Sports reporter, brought up a good point. Hopefully it's not going to be that bad in September, because this will be a playoff race when they come back here in September. And it would be a shame to see someone blow a tire at there or something and screw up their entire hope of a playoff run there at Bristol. So we'll see. I don't think it will be the issues that we had, but you know what? The thing is, now they've got a notebook, right? So when they do come back in here in September, they will know what to expect. and know how to react to it, because everybody's going to be queuing off, especially the Joe Gibbs racing teams, because Ty Gibbs was up there. Martin Truex Jr. was chasing down Hamlin for the lead late in the race. Ty Gibbs led the second most laps, swept the stages. So the Joe Gibbs team had it figured out. So they'll be the ones to clue off of when we come back in here in September.
And Joe Gibbs had it down at Phoenix last week, so they clearly have something on the short tracks. But I do think there was, as you say, a lot of driver talent on display, and we saw Brad Keselowski running well.
Yep.
And so a lot of other drivers. John Hunter Nemechek, a rookie in a Toyota.
All right. So we had a great race. We had guys and drivers and teams adjusting to it. The TV ratings were up significantly. Of course, this race last year in this position was Atlanta, but they had great TV ratings. Let me ask you, Owen, first off, did you see it in the pub? I know what the answer is, I think.
I had a swim meet, so I had to watch it a little bit delayed, unfortunately, but I came into it knowing how good you thought it was, and I was definitely not disappointed at all. Great race, a lot of strategy plays and movers and shakers, which we haven't seen on short tracks really since the next gen got introduced. And so I really enjoyed it.
I think it was a great race. And it harkened back to the races of old when as Chris Gabehart talked about, they go by degrees and the engineers get in there and 3 inches this way or that way. And all that was out the window, and they just had to go old school. And I really, really hope that NASCAR doesn't react too much, and Goodyear doesn't react too much to this. And, Bob Pockris, Fox Sports reporter, brought up a good point. Hopefully it's not going to be that bad in September, because this will be a playoff race when they come back here in September. And it would be a shame to see someone blow a tire at there or something and screw up their entire hope of a playoff run there at Bristol. So we'll see. I don't think it will be the issues that we had, but you know what? The thing is, now they've got a notebook, right? So when they do come back in here in September, they will know what to expect and know how to react to it, because everybody's going to be queuing off, especially the Joe Gibbs racing teams, because Ty Gibbs was up there. Martin Truex Jr. was chasing down Hamlin for the lead late in the race. Ty Gibbs led the second most laps, swept the stages. So the Joe Gibbs team had it figured out. So they'll be the ones to clue off of when we come back in here in September.
And Joe Gibbs had it down at Phoenix last week, so they clearly have something on the short tracks. But I do think there was, as you say, a lot of driver talent on display, and we saw Brad Keselowski running well.
Yep.
And so a lot of other drivers. John Hunter Nemechek, a rookie in a Toyota, was running well too. So I think there was a lot of driver talent on display, not just the teams, although obviously Gibbs got it down.
So, and I agree. I just, like I said, I hope NASCAR and Goodyear don't react too much. And when they come back in here in September, they have a tire. I'd like to find a happy medium where maybe, because they used PJ1 in September, and then they used a different traction compound this time around. And I think, and somebody else pointed out that the temperatures here, as opposed to September, because Goodyear admitted they didn't know what happened, because they brought the same tire they had in September, but the biggest differences was they didn't use the PJ1. But something that I think Reed Spencer with the NASCAR Wire Service pointed out, the temperature was 10 to 15 degrees less on Sunday than it was in September. So who knows? That could have been a factor, may not have been a factor. It could be that we'll have the same kind of racing in September that we had the previous September, or we'll have something that's a happy medium. I mean, come on, 54 lead changes, which was a record, not only just at Bristol, but in all of NASCAR short track. So you have that short track package like we had at Sunday. And, NASCAR's been tweaking these short track packages, and they tested them at Phoenix and all that. And it's going to be interesting to see if maybe they could start to say, hey, maybe we just need to start less on the car and more on the tire. Maybe that's the key to these short track packages.
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is Bristol did not use the short track package. Bristol used the same package they're running on the intermediates because of the high banks. So the next time we're going to see this specific package is going to be at Dover. And so I'm very much looking forward to that race to see how the tires are going to react, if Goodyear brings the same type of tire, or if we get the same racing we saw last year. But the other short tracks are going to be a test as well, but it's going to be a different package than we saw at Bristol.
And speaking of the other short tracks, you're going to be back here stateside. You're going to be at Martinsville. And I know that because they
Yes.
called me today to confirm that. Yeah, just
Good to know.
yeah. So you're in like Flynn, man. My one assignment for you when you get to Martinsville will be to give an honest, an opinion and an in-depth feature on the Martinsville hot dog, because that's like famous there. I'm not a big fan of them, but they're cheap. So anyway, you will be at Martinsville. And thanks for reminding me. I was thinking the short track package was at Bristol. You're right. It's not. It's an intermediate package. But I think the point there is whether it's the short track package, the intermediate package, I think NASCAR's attention may have, they may have a light bulb come on, and it may be that they're going to start looking at those tires. So we'll see coming in the future. They're doing some more tire testing at North Wilkesboro today. Today's Wednesday, so I know they did that with the new pavement, which looks spectacular. I can't wait to get there in May for the All-Star race. I'll be there for that. So we'll look forward to that. So they're doing some tire testing today at North Wilkesboro. I wonder if they're going to be looking at that, looking at the tires going forward in the future.
Absolutely. I personally hope they do. I thought that was a great race, and I'd like to see it again.
Yep. All right. So next up.
Why, you little maggot! You make me want to vomit!
All right, we got some rants this week. And one of the things that Jeff Gluck does, and I've known Jeff Gluck since he was a wee little lad, newspaper reporter for a local paper in North Carolina. And now he's big time. He's all that. He runs a poll every week. How did you like the race? And obviously we all of us liked the race, but there was like just over 10% of the people that voted no. And I cannot figure out for the life of me why just over 10% of the people didn't like Bristol. The only thing I could think is they're diehard I hate Denny fans. Or I hate, I love Kyle Larson and he should have won. I don't get it. Why you would say no, but I think it just goes to the emotionality of some NASCAR fans who vote with their heart, and don't vote with with any kind of common sense. But I'm sure did you see the poll? Did you vote? Because I voted yes. I'm not going to lie.
I voted yes as well. But I think as we saw with the Atlanta poll, there's never going to be a race that makes every NASCAR fan happy. That's what we love about our fan base, to be fair. Always some contradicting opinions. But I think there are some valid things to critique about the race. The tires weren't perfect. There was probably too much fall off, and they didn't have practice, which meant that teams weren't really able to get the most out of the cars. And there are some fans who don't like watching a race where drivers aren't able to push the entire race. I think that's valid, but I think it was a good race, and I think personally it definitely outweighs any of the negatives. But I think you're never going to get a race that gets 100% of NASCAR fans happy. So
yeah, and they did have limited practice. They had 2 20-minute practice sessions, so there was that. And that's how they knew about the 30 laps. But yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I think some people wanted them to push all the way, and I don't know which driver it was, but one of the drivers talked about sometimes it's in our hands and we can't go all out, and you're looking for 3 1,000ths of a second per lap because you're trying to keep up with the pack, and sometimes it is better to put it back in the hands of the drivers. And I agree with you. I think that putting it back in the hands of the drivers like that, regardless of whether they're not doing the full speed or anything, I think it's all about pushing the envelope, whatever the envelope is. And I think they were doing that given the tires and everything. So yeah, I agree with you. I think some people were complaining about the fact that these guys weren't pushing, or weren't going fast. So that's what I think. And I agree with you. I think NASCAR fans, and you're right, our fan base is fantastic. But I think these are some of the type of people that if they won the lottery, they would complain about having to pay taxes, right? You won $1 million, you got to pay, $100,000 tax or whatever. You still got $900,000. But all right. And my other rant this week, and maybe you've noticed this floating around the universe, We talked last week about the difference between content creators and reporters and the difference in that. One thing is because I style myself as an old school reporter, I started in newspapers, and there are times when you ask drivers questions about things, and there's times when you don't ask drivers about certain things. If I'm tracking down a driver for a feature story about a new sponsor or something, I'm certainly not going to go up to him after he gets out of the race car, right as he gets out of the race car, and ask him the question I'm trying to track him down for all weekend. I couldn't get to him. I've had a driver actually tell me that before, where he got out of the car and said, "Hey, didn't you have a question about my sponsor or something?" I'm like, "Dude, you just got out of the car." Because to me, when these guys get out of the car, they got the adrenaline dump, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's still flowing 110 miles an hour. And you're not going to get the same answer from them that you would 20 minutes later when they've had a chance to calm down. So a lot of times you see these drivers get out and all sweaty and red faced and still pumped and still fired up. And you ask them a question, and we get the emotions. I'm not a big fan of that, just because they're all going to say the same thing. My race sucked, or it was great. I think like we talked to Martin. They talked to Martin Truex Jr. on coming second this past weekend. I think that's important, but I don't care about sixth place. Unless that person led the most laps or something. Maybe Ty Gibbs, for instance, in this week. I saw somebody, and I'm going back to content creators, because some of these content creators do great work, and they bring a lot to the sport, but there's sometimes when I think they kind of step over the line a little bit. And I saw somebody confront Ryan Blaney after the race, and they were talking to him about how his race went, and and he was talking, and he wasn't happy because he didn't do well. He had some issues. So obviously he was one of the few drivers that didn't like what happened this weekend. So there he was, having to face that, and he wasn't too happy about that. And then one of the younger people, who I consider to be more of a content creator than a reporter, asked him a question about a feud he had a couple weeks ago with another driver. And I loved Ryan Blaney's answer, because he turned to him and said, that's a dumb question. I'm done answering that question. I'm sure as hell I'm not going to answer that question right here on pit road right after the race. And he walked away. And I was like, bravo, Ryan. It must, I think it's these guys need to stand up and say that, because there was times in the past when he would have, sucked it up and tried to answer the question. But no, he knew this wasn't the right time and the right place to do that. And just like the old adage when you see on TV, when you see a guy in the garage sitting in his car in the middle of the race and it's broke, or he had a wreck or something, if his window net's up, you don't approach him. If the window net's down, he's fair game. And I think it's the kind of the case here. So that's my rant on that. If you're a content creator, start to learn the appropriate times to ask the right questions. And when a driver gets out of the car, talk to him about his race, talk to him about how his day went. If you have another something you want to ask him, get a hold of the PR, meet him somewhere, do a phone call, something else. But it really makes everybody look dumb when you're trying to do that and you're getting that kind of response, which obviously is going to end up on the internet, because that's how social media is. If Ryan Blaney's acting ugly and cussing and blowing you off, that's going to end up on social media. And that's where I saw it. That's where it ended up. And that doesn't look good for anybody. So there's my rant. You got any rants before we move on?
I mean, I think that's what we love about Ryan Blaney, is he's going to tell you what it is. But I do think, just to your point about the interviews getting out of the car, I personally have really enjoyed the move from recent years to front stretch interviews instead of victory lane. I think I really like the raw emotion of the drivers as they get out of the car, and I feel like it's almost less scripted. It's less of the runoff of the sponsors and a little bit more about the real emotion of the race, especially for some of the first wins or long droughts, when the drivers are really emotional getting out of the car. I really enjoy seeing that from the drivers.
And I remember back in probably when Jimmy Johnson first came on the scene, and everybody chided Jimmy Johnson for being the vanilla, right? And he was in a lot of ways. But I remember him qualifying. I think at the time it was called Lowe's Motor Speedway, Charlotte Motor Speedway. And I remember him getting out of the car after qualifying, and his hand was shaking. And I didn't understand that at first. It took me a minute to realize, why is his hand shaking? And where have I seen that before? And I realized that I had seen it because when I was in the military and I would jump out of perfectly good airplanes, which I only did because I got paid for it, you would have these adrenaline dumps, right? You get done, you land, everything's fine, you're wrapping up your chute. And if you stand there, you'll notice, your hands shaking, right? And it's the adrenaline dump. And Jimmy was so polished despite that. And he was one of the experts at that kind of polished kind of thing where he could temper his emotions. But on the edge, you could see that he was still pumped and he was still having the adrenaline dump. And he became such an expert at doing that. So yeah, I see what you're saying. And I agree with you. We need to get that raw emotion. But sometimes drivers need to realize that what they're saying when they get out of the car is not going to be the same thing as they'll say 20 minutes from, after the fact, or 30 minutes or whatever. So yeah, we'll see. And we'll see what happens this week. And speaking of this week, heading to the Circuit of Americas, the first road course race of the year. There's a new restart zone. And I talked earlier to Austin Cindric. Last few weeks for him have been a mess. He was 29th at the Daytona 500, which he won a couple years ago, 36th, 31st, or 36 at Atlanta, or it was 29th, 30. He was at 29th at Atlanta, then 36th, 31st at Bristol. And I talked to Austin Cindric because I'll tell you, I have some good feelings about him coming to COTA. He's got to have some confidence coming there and actually kind of looking forward to it. I mean, this season obviously hasn't been what you've hoped for so far. I mean, it's early and you got a long time to turn it around. When do you start looking at COTA, knowing that you're always ran strong there, and you just mentioned it with the next gen car? When do you start looking forward to COTA as kind of a relief kind of race, knowing that you're probably going to do pretty well there?
Yeah, it's funny because 2 weeks ago, I would have gotten the same questions from a lot of folks saying, "Oh, how great your start of the season has gone," and now 2 weeks later, it's, "Oh, you're in a rut." It's so easy to react to that kind of stuff. It's a pretty long game here, so I feel like I have to defend that in a moment that it's a long season, and yeah, the last 2 weeks have been wildly out of the control of what I feel like our race team's capable of in a few different ways. So, but as far as COTA stacks up for me, yeah, it's no matter how you cut it, it's been a racetrack that I've been able to be competitive at and lead laps every time I've been there in a Cup car. So I can't. Personally, it's not necessarily my favorite racetrack, to be honest, but it's somewhere that we performed well. I seem to have a package that works well there, and yeah, after the last couple of weeks, I'm very hungry to just execute and everyone get to do our jobs. I mean, that comes down to my pit crew as well, and just everybody just kind of getting in a rhythm again, because you know we haven't been able to, and as much as we race, it feels awkward to not have anything to really think about from a normal standpoint of like, oh, we maybe need to do this to improve the car, or that, not have these massive issues, whether if it's getting wrecked out early, or having this tire and track debacle, or any of that. Like, let's just reset, and I think it's a great weekend to do it.
And it will be a long season, and you've got a lot of great opportunities ahead. And have fun this weekend. You're my pick. I appreciate it, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So there you go. The guy's got 3 starts there, 2 top 10s, a top 5 in the Xfinity Series. And as I told him, he is my pick for this week. So tell me your thoughts on COTA and who you got this week.
Well, I think just a few things to address before COTA is on the topic of packages. It's a different package this year. The same short track package will be on the road courses. So that'll be something to watch for. The restart zone is also, last year at COTA had some crazy restarts, bumping and banging. Some people hated it, some people loved it, but they're trying to get rid of it, I think, to an extent, because these cars are just so tough that, you can kind of bump and bang more than you ever have in the past. So that we'll see if the new restart zone changes anything there. But two guys I've got my eye on, Kamui Kobayashi and Shane Van Gisbergen. It'll be an Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course rematch here. See if either of them can get to victory lane. But I think my strongest pick is going to be Tyler Reddick. He's been very good on the road courses in the next-gen car. Those Toyotas have been fast with the package they're running. So we'll see if that translates to road course speed.
And he's the defending winner. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of us kind of agree on our picks. One thing that we didn't have is a Chevy. We got Toyota with Reddick. We got a Ford with Cindric. So, if a Chevy wins this weekend, well, that'll be on us. And I think the last Chevy that won there was Ross Chastain. I believe that was 2 years ago. So yeah, we'll see. We'll look forward to that, and hopefully it won't get a lot of rain like we had a couple years ago. I haven't seen the forecast, but looking good, my friend. I think it will be good. I hope to talk to you after COTA. In the meantime, we got to work on getting you to the pub, man. We got an update on that?
We got to find a new. I'll find some pub that will put it on. We'll find a pub that has Viaplay. We'll find one.
Well, I'm talking to Jimmy next week, Jimmy Johnson. I hope to get him on this program. I got to talk to him about something else, and if all the cards plays right, I'll get him on here. And he is living in England, so maybe you guys can hook up and go have a NASCAR watch party somewhere.
You know what? If he's willing, I'm down anytime.
There you go. Okay, that's on my bucket list now, is to get you guys together. So I'll talk to Jimmy Johnson. Should be on the program next week if it all works out. If not, I'll let you know. Owen, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. Always great to be on.
Yep, and we'll have Owen at Martinsville in a couple weeks, back stateside, back on home soil. In the meantime, he's going to be not only hunting for a pub for a watch party, he's also going to be looking for Princess Kate, take some pictures so him and I can retire. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.